Welcome back to Business Morning. We're still talking about the cashless policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's going to kick off on the 1st of April in Lagos. Well, the rest of the nation will have that opportunity from next year. The CBN still wants to monitor the process in Lagos and see how well it works. And of course, there are a number of companies that will be involved in this process too. Call them the enablers. They're the ones who provide the software, or who will be providing the software to ensure that the system works smoothly. Well, joining me now in the studios is Yele Okeremi. He's a Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Precise Financial Systems Limited. Thank you so much, Yele, for being here.
My pleasure.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, when the Central Bank came up with this policy, of course, there was talk about technology involved, infrastructure on the ground, all that will make the process smooth. But so many concerns were still raised about the fact that in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the systems in place, perhaps we're not there yet, perhaps we don't have, it's not adequate. But we do know that many banks, as I mentioned earlier, have been using all kinds of softwares in their daily operations, and obviously it's been working.
Absolutely.
But why this concern is being raised now that we're talking about the cashless? And just to start from the basics, what role do companies like yours play in this process?
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, the cashless economy, as we speak about, is a form of migration from the traditional or orthodox way of doing business and moving into electronic business, as it were. So you realize that this whole thing is all about technology. And of course, when you look at the way we are as a country, the banks tend to be at the cutting edge of technology. So as far as the banks are concerned, they definitely are much more prepared than quite a number of organizations and individuals. But cashless economy is not just about banks. It's about everybody. It's about the society. And if we are going to do the cashless economy effectively, then, people need to tool up. Everybody has to tool up. The banks are, almost there, I will say, but then so many other people have to tool up.
When you say people, people involved in the chain of the process, the whole?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. So, if you went to a shop in abroad in the UK and you wanted to pay for whatever you were buying, of course you have options of paying either in cash or several other options for you to pay at the till. But when you choose to use either a debit card or a credit card to pay, now let's look at what happens. Two things happen simultaneously, but it's transparent to you. You put the card in the POS, or basically they use POSs, most of them, or PIN pads, as the case may be. You put the card in the POS, and it interacts with you putting your PIN. Now, when you do this thing, two things happen simultaneously there. First of all, money is transferred from your own account into the account of the merchant, as it were. And then secondly, the system interacts with the in-house accounting system of the merchant, affecting their inventory position, affecting their cash position. So you see, you don't know it, but it happens on the same thread. Now, these are things that must change. So it's going to be difficult for you to do two disparate things. One, to move the money, and then one, to affect your own internal processes. Now, these are things that must happen, and these organizations must tool up effectively to make this happen.
Okay, let's talk about where you come in. You talked about your company being one of the companies that provides software for the process. What role? I want to know in the chain of processes. Where does your company stand, or the software companies as well? Because I do know that you said that you are the enablers as well of the system. So let's break it down.
So if we want to break it down, so we say that it's a boom to the software industry, because like I said earlier, everything we're talking about is software. Take for example, so now banks, even the banks that are very well prepared, the policy says that they will no longer accept manual schedules for payments. Now there must be software that links the payer to the bank, and it's supposed to be, as it is said, in a straight-through process. So first of all, we have to provide services to the payer to enable them connect to their banks, for example. Secondly, we have to enable the banks, because now you see it's a different ball game. It's no longer the way it used to be, where banks would specify that if you wanted to make some payments and only a few people are making payments. So the banks themselves have to be prepared for a lot more volume. So you see, so we come in both ends. And what happens is that everybody has some application that they are running to maintain their books. And the payment processes must be seamlessly linked to both ends. So linked at the end of the payer and linked at the end of the banks. So, I mean, we have to work with both parties.
Okay, with these cashless policies, would the banks need new softwares to be created? If they do,
yes.
Were they given sufficient time? Because I know they would come to companies like yours to sit down and develop the softwares that would ensure that the process is smooth and checks and ensure that there are no gaps or leakages where that will leave room for fraud or mistakes or errors, errors that could cost the bank or even cost the customer a lot.
Yes.
So was that the case?
And I would say that's a good question. And initially, I expressed my concerns about that, and I think the central bank has been responsive in these lights. When the policy first of all came, that it was going to take off early in the year. I mean, it looks easy to say it, but when it really comes to ensuring that it works, it's not easy, it's not cheap. Let me give you a simple example. There are 774 local governments in Nigeria. Each of them has its own ways of doing things. It is humanly impossible for you to expect all of them to fully integrate within the time frame that was given. And these are the reasons why the central bank has listened to these concerns and extended.
Now, I want to believe that the central bank did sit down with all the stakeholders, the banks, perhaps the software providers, everybody that would make the process a smooth one.
Absolutely.
So why do you think that the Apex Bank would come out and give a time frame that you said was perhaps not realizable or not feasible, and then expect it to work, and then after a while, when we had the lashback or the feedback from the public that wasn't too pleasant, they went back and said, okay, we're listening to the general public, okay, let's extend it, Lagos for now, the rest of the country later on. Are you saying it wasn't well thought out?
No, well, I won't say so. I would say it's just a sign of the central bank being, responsive to the realities on ground. The way it is if you know everything, then you become God in advance. So I would say perhaps it's not easy for anybody to know everything in advance. You see, when you sit down sometimes to want to come up with policies, there are quite a number of times that you expect a smooth ride. But when 36,000 feet above the sea level, there's no difference between a 52-story building and even the ground. So if they were looking at it at 36,000 feet above the sea level, it was easy for them to say, yeah, we're going to go tomorrow. But when you come down, when you come on ground, then you begin to see some processes that must change. You begin to see that even the change management process in organization would take time. It's not just technology. It's not just, even if we were able to buy software ready-made and just plug and play, people need to be trained.
No, but that's the impression the general public got, that the central bank had it all covered. Because I'm just wondering, if you say that the central bank was unrealistic in that time frame, I'm just thinking you want to embark on a particular journey. You sit down, you calculate the costs, routes and all of that, and you know what it would take to take you there. But if you didn't have all of that in place, and then you embark on that journey, isn't it foolhardy to and then you get to some point of the journey and then you reverse? And when I was talking to the representative from the central bank yesterday, he did make a statement. He said, the central bank would just roll it out, let's just start, and as it were, and then correct it as we go. No, we're talking about the financial system here. We're talking about passwords. We're talking about softwares. We're talking about things that are prone to, if anything goes wrong, there could be very, very huge losses. So don't you think that this thing should have been more thought out, as it were, before rolling it out there? I want to believe that at some point the central bank did sit down with banks along with the software providers. So if at that meeting, I'm not sure if when that took place.
No, they did, and there were quite a few stakeholders fora as well. Like I said earlier, if you know everything in advance, then you are getting to the realm of God.
It's not about knowing everything, just knowing what you have, what your capabilities are, what you're arming yourself with that would help you, embark on a journey that will be successful. If you don't have everything, then work with what you have.
I agree with you. Yes, I agree with you. But you see, sometimes again, judgments. When you look at even in organizations, the layers of management, quite a number of times people in the executive suite say things. We want this to happen. And sometimes we do it and we say, I want it to happen now. But when the operatives come and explain things, then, executive management also realizes sometimes. First, I think it's a good policy. I think it's workable. I think it's good. I think given the time frame that we have now, I expect better success than the initial time frame of it must happen within that couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened within weeks. It will take time. Even when you look at when companies know what to do. Organizations, individuals is not a big problem because you take your decisions and you move with it. But when it's an organization, and some of them also have reporting lines overseas, the due process for taking the decision sometimes is a matter of time too. So these are all the things that play. So sometimes when we look at these things from the technical point, we also have to look at it from practicability. So
and give a little margin for error or extension of time or something like that.
Precisely.
Okay, in terms of preparedness, as far as software is concerned, infrastructure, which is a major concern, are we there? Do we have enough on ground to ensure that this process, at least for Lagos, since that's where we are right now, the one for Lagos that's going to kick off on April the 1st, you would know, you're a software provider.
Well, yes, I have an idea. Let me not say I will know. I will say I have an idea. You see, when we talk about infrastructure, and there are two different things. Software. Well, of course, invariably software also becomes part of the infrastructure that will be used as a were. But so when we look at infrastructure, so we're looking at the network environment, we're looking at power. Of course, you and I know.
Okay, in terms of infrastructure, okay, that will be the major issue.
Those are real challenges. You see, software is not the easy part at all. But neither is it rocket science.
So is it a major or in the process, in the whole chain of the process, is it a major
software
or a minor? Because you talked about power and the rest being major, of course, issues.
No, software, the whole thing lies on software.
So I'm asking, in terms of that, are we ready? Do we have enough software?
Yeah, well...
Do we have a good for the banks?
Yeah, I will say the answer is a yes. And I'll tell you why I say the answer is a yes. Because when you look at the software process, software by its own self is not rocket science, and it is available not just locally sometimes. The skills are available, internationally. So when you talk about the software in itself, whether it is ready or not, even when they are not ready, they can be made ready, within not too long a time frame. However, the challenges are implementation. If you have ever been involved in a software project before, installing the software is sometimes a matter of hours or 2 days. But after you have got that software running, connecting it to all where we use languages like interfaces, the people and all the likes are the things that take time. And it's going to be very challenging, sincerely. It is going to be challenging.
Okay, hold your thoughts for us. We need to take a short break at this time. I have been talking to Yele Okeremi. He's a Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Precise Financial Systems Limited. They're a software provider to banks, and of course they also are playing the big part in the whole cashless policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. We'll be back in a moment. You're still watching Business Morning. Welcome back. I still have Yele Okeremi, the MD, CEO of Precise Financial Systems Limited, and we're looking at the CBN's cashless policy and also the software that will empower or enable this process to be smooth. And we have been talking about the software, and he says that, of course, he's one of the companies that will be providing the software. And of course, there are issues like we talked about before during the break. You talked about change management issues, the impact of this policy on the organizations, the banks, yes, and all those involved in the process. Could you shed more light on that for us?
Okay, when you look at, there are several businesses. I've given an example of the retailer, for example. So before now, what happens? You walk into a pharmacy or a supermarket and you wanted to buy anything, you would just pick whatever you wanted to buy and pay cash, and you leave. Now what happens is that at the end of the day or at a specific time when the retailer is happy, they count all the cash they've got, and then they take the cash to the bank, and there's a process that you and I met, even as children, that if you wanted to pay cash to a bank, there's a process. Now, we are saying the reverse is going to happen sometimes. We are now saying that, first of all, for some people, the payment will be made on a POS terminal, which means they don't see the cash. It goes into their bank account instantly. Now, let me tell you the implication of that. First of all, before now, 500 people can shop in a particular shop, and they are all paying cash, little trickles of cash. It doesn't matter how much it is. But at the end of the day, they take the entire bulk cash to the bank. It's only one transaction in the bank account. Now, 500 people are doing transactions, and they are doing them in those small tranches. Each of those transactions is going to reflect in the books as individual transactions. Now, that's a different ball game. It means that if the retailer before now had some software that had the capacity to capture maybe 50 banking transactions in a month, he's got to look at the system that will capture in the thousands now. It doesn't matter what the value is. The value may just be flat, but the volume is going to increase. Now, secondly, his own mindset is going to change. Before now, he says, I pay 500,000 to the bank account, but now he's going to be seeing little amounts of money. The reconciliation process is going to be different completely. That's one aspect of it. There are other aspects. Some people actually say, okay, you go to the bank and pay cash to our account and bring the teller. We have a way of we verify from the bank if the cash is there, and then they do their processes. Now, again, because particularly for people that sell things like cement, for example, one single transaction could be in the millions. So it's going to be done differently now. And that means that the entire process, before now, you used to bring a teller back to them. Now, because you are not paying cash anymore, what you are going to give to them is different. They need to retool altogether. So these are the issues, these are changes that are going to happen in the society. And every operator, those are the things I was talking about, that it's not just about the software. So some of them already have software, ERPs that even have some of these facilities.
They have been doing them before now.
But because nobody has been using those modules. Some of them, the modules are there. Some of them, the modules have not been licensed. So there are licensing issues. And just like I said earlier, sometimes the process of even getting approvals for some of these things are things you have to consider. The process of the vendors implementing them is also there. And lastly, the training is also there. And don't forget, when we have any change in the society like this, I said there are 3 pivots on which every change like this must sit on. First of all, so we've got the technology, which I said, practically is the easiest of them. We've got the legislation, which, even now, I would like us, I think we'll go into that when we talk about the check truncation and cashless, the legislative leg on which this thing stands. And then most importantly, the social aspect of it. How do the people receive it? Because this is all about
we
people.
do know how Nigerians or Lagosians, as it were, have been receiving it. The CBN representative was saying yesterday that, because of change, and I have sampled so many opinions, and it doesn't look like people are embracing it.
Absolutely.
So perhaps, and the major concern was that we should allow our financial process to evolve and not have this hard, I don't know whether to call it hard policies, being shoved down the throats of Lagosians at once. But we do have to grow at some point. It's going to come to us at some point, whether or not we're ready or whether or not we like it. So I guess then now that it's going to be rolled out, whether or not we like it, we'll see how all of that plays. And now in terms of still going back to the technology or the software, in terms of firewalls in the system, how strong, how reliable are these firewalls? We do know there's still the issue of fraud. Many of the systems are based on passwords, pins, and all of that. How strong are these firewalls?
Well, I think the issues are not how strong firewalls are.
If you're going to be dealing with the system software, of course, passwords, and of course there's a human error also.
Yes. You see, and that's why I said I think the issue is really not how strong the firewalls are. The challenge is, again, their mindset issues. There's no firewall that is perfect anywhere in the world. And that's why you see today.
Yeah, but it's a new system we're going into. It's a new software is being developed, like you said, for this process, for the system. We don't know what they are.
Yes.
No, but we want to believe that they're safe and can be used effectively by the banks.
We expect that they are. And that's why I said, even when you talk about things like firewalls, like you just mentioned, those are infrastructure things. Antiviruses, firewalls. These ones have been in existence for many years before now. But it is because there's no perfect firewall that firewalls have revisions. You understand? So there will always be possibilities. People are going to get smarter, so you build the wall this high, and some other guy devises a technology of leaping higher, puts a spring, and then he can jump higher than it. So the guy that's built that firewall is going to try to make it either higher or wider and stuff like that. So I think the issue is not how good firewalls are. The firewalls, they protect us. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But for anybody to say firewalls and any infrastructure or any software is 100% safe, I think is not correct.
Okay, let's talk about the concept of a check truncation. You talked about it earlier. What tell us about it?
Yeah, and that's also very interesting because the central bank is doing many things at the same time, and I think they are positive, actually, trying to improve the payment systems of the country and making Nigeria also become included, globally in financial services and payments. So what check truncation actually means is just dematerialization of paper checks. So what it means is that, and that has the least impact on the general populace. A lot of the impact, of course, I will talk about the impact on each and every one of us as well, because there are certain things that are going to change as well for us as individuals. But the bigger impact for the check truncation is with the banks. The way we do clearing now, if I gave you a check and your account was in First Bank and mine was in Stanbic Bank, you would take my Stanbic Bank to your First Bank, and then there's a way First Bank exchanges the paper.
It take about
the check.
5 days or so for it to clear.
Well, now it's 3 days actually. So because of these processes, because it takes time for you to go there, it takes time for them to batch them and send them to what we call the clearing house, and then the other bank receives it. So check truncation is dematerializing this. So it is saying that these paper checks do not need to be exchanged between the two banks anymore. The two banks will work with the electronic representation of the instrument, basically the image, and that's a very interesting thing.
How does that work? How does it start? Start from the beginning. I have a check.
Yes.
Or I don't. Like you said, I won't even go and present a paper check, but I do need to go.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Fine,
but of course. I should, and I hope if we have time, I would like to talk about it. But because the check truncation actually does provide an opportunity for you not to have to go and present that paper. But perhaps we haven't got there yet as a country. But let's talk about the way it is right now. So you still take the paper check. That's why I said the impact on you as an individual is least. So you take the paper check to the bank. But now what the banks do is to scan the check, and that's what I call the dematerialization of the paper. And rather than sending this paper to the clearing house, they just send the images together with the other data to the other bank, and the other bank works with the images and the other data to determine whether the check is good or bad, and if it's good, it gets into your account. And that's a very interesting thing. Because of this, the clearing days is shortening again, and that of course increases what we call the velocity of money in the economy.
Now, okay, while this new policy obviously is for the good of the financial system, reducing the volume of cash, going up and down in the system.
Yes.
Now, for you, going forward, what are those major key challenges you see the process encountering? I talked, when the CBN was here yesterday, the representative, he did say that, well, his only concern was how Lagosians will embrace that resistance. He said the fact that people are just basically resisting change. For you, I know you are part of the core process, the software. What challenge you think perhaps on the side of banks or the system is aware would go through?
Now, I'll tell you what, particularly on the check truncation, I have had very many consultations with bankers, and just like about any new thing, even they are afraid because they have never seen this happening before. But a lot of times when I sit with them and I hear their fears and break it down on paper, I realize that once it starts, everybody will get much more convenient. And you said something that, I actually think that, just like you said, we should allow the financial system and payment processes to evolve. Because what check truncation actually does, contrary to what people think, is that it will reduce a lot of fraud, check frauds. As a matter of fact, the way it is done, if we don't have the legislation yet in Nigeria, but in some other climes where they have legislation on check truncation, it is actually stated that once a check is truncated, that transaction ceases. And the operative word is ceases. It ceases to be a paper transaction. It becomes an automated clearinghouse transaction. And that brings it in the same realm of using cards and switches. It brings checks to exactly that realm. And we can talk some more about why banks are probably, because the big frauds in banks now are people, they steal checks and they clone checks and do all sorts of things. And so banks are afraid that, when I receive my check, I can look at it, I can look at the security features that are put on it, but now that I'm not going to get that instrument, how do I know? But there are very many simple ways that we can tackle some of these issues. And I was discussing with a few bankers just a couple of days ago. I said, look, very simple. The moment we start crossing checks, and I will be very specific about what I mean by crossing checks. Electronic payments now, if I want to pay the e-payments that we are, quite a number of people are doing, they know your bank account, they know your bank. So if I'm going to pay you, I will transfer to your bank. Now, if I want to write a check to you as Esther Ogudara, I would write pay First Bank of Nigeria, Esther Ogudara. The moment that happens, it means that check becomes very, very safe. Why? Because it's impossible for anybody else to present the check except it's presenting via First Bank. And if anything happens, we're going to ask First Bank, how many Esthers do you know? So you see, when you really look at the check truncation and the possibilities, it brings checks to levels of securities that are, I would say, unprecedented, sincerely. So
are we going to have this process, or is it going to be part of the feature?
Well, first of all, things are going to happen immediately, so checks are going to be truncated. But I think going forward, if I were to submit a memorandum to the central bank, I would even say to the central bank that there's no reason for them. The cap that they have put on checks to 10 million, I would say there's no reason for that cap to be there anymore.
Perhaps we shouldn't be too hasty, because we're still trying to get used to the system.
No, don't forget that checks.
The banks are a little bit nervous.
Yeah, they are nervous. You see, but don't forget that before now, we didn't have limits on checks. You could write a check for 10 billion. The limits came only recently.
Yeah, of course. I want to believe owing to the frauds, cases of frauds that were being recorded.
Absolutely. So. But the truncation project, the truncation process removes some of these barriers we're talking about.
Okay, for you going forward, you don't have any fears of what the system might encounter in terms of challenges for this process going forward, apart from the fact that many people are still not very clear. Yes. And I did take the CBN up on that in terms of awareness campaigns. Many people, if you ask the average Nigerians, are still not clear on the process until they get to the bank and have it explained to them step by step. It doesn't look like what the one being done on TV or the radio jingles are getting through. So it's actually when the person goes to the bank and wants to engage in that transaction that he's actually educated and said, okay, this is what will happen, this is what you do, and this is what the process is about.
Yes, I consider myself to be privileged to start with, having insight into the insider workings of this thing, So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not nervous. And why I'm not nervous is very simple. I say, because I understand that there's absolutely nothing that can happen to this process that cannot be fixed within hours, actually.
So we'll just be fixing the errors or challenges as we go. That's what it's going to come down to.
But that's just about that's what life is all about. That's what evolution is all about. We start a process and we realize that we can get smarter, either because there's a technological breakthrough or a societal change or a social change. That's what life is all about. So even what we think we are doing today, that we think it's very laudable, very brilliant, very excellent, just give us a few years and something else is going to happen. And we should be able to improve on it.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
On the program. I have been talking to Yele Okeremi. He's the MD, Chief Executive Officer of Precise Financial Systems, and we have been looking at the central bank's cashless policy taken off in Lagos from the 1st of April this year. We've also been looking at some very intricate issues in terms of software and infrastructure that's presently on ground to ensure that the process is a smooth one. We'll take another quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're just about 10 minutes to the hour of 11. Let's go now to the money market. That's financial market indicators for yesterday. The cost of lending at the interbank market edged higher again. On Thursday, we saw core money, that's a short-term lending money, edging higher to around 15.2%. Banks and discount houses also traded the secured open buyback higher at a 14.3% average. And at the currencies arm of the market, the naira ended flat against the dollar, trading at 157 naira 86 kobo to the dollar. We did get some maturing bills yesterday that came into the system from the primary market auction and the open market operations, one of the CBN's monetary policy tools to help moderate cash in the economy. Now, from the OMO, we had the 139-day tenure worth about 5.3 billion naira given at the rate of 15.9%, and 136-day tenure for 43.4 billion naira given at the rate of 16%. So all of that came into the system. But because of the regular cash outflows to treasury bills and foreign exchange purchases, that still puts pressure on rates at the market. Let's go over now to our earnings board. As you know, we're still very much in earnings season. Yesterday we got about 3 earnings from from 3 of the companies listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. One of them was from Stanbic IBTC, one of Nigeria's commercial banks. It's a full year audited report for the year 2011. Turnover came in higher this time, up 18.8% at 67.4 billion naira. However, the profit before tax came in lower, down 16.9% to 11.2 billion naira. Profit after tax also dropped by about 0.25% at 7.4 billion naira. Fixed assets are down 3.2%, but the company is still proposing a cash dividend of 10 naira per share. It still has about 18.7 billion naira in outstanding shares, but despite the red numbers that we're getting from Stanbic IBTC, investors can still have something to smile about. Nigerian Aviation Handling Company NACO also posted its 2011 full-year earnings yesterday. Turnover came in high, up 12.5% at 7.1 billion naira. Profit before tax, however, slumped 31.2% at 1.17 billion naira, while profit after tax also came down quite low, down 35.6% at 757.7 million naira. Well, despite that, the company is proposing a cash dividend of 25 kobo per share and also a bonus of 1 for every 5 shares held. So investors will get 1 new share for every 5 shares held from the company. Capital Hotel PLC also put out its first earnings from 2011. Turnover came in marginally lower, down 2.5% at 4.9 billion naira. Profit before tax came in lower, down 34.2% at 703 million naira. Well, profit after tax as a general profit, net profit also came in marginally lower, down by 2.9% at 581.1 million naira. The company is also proposing a cash dividend of 7 kobo. So it's not all gloomy, although the numbers have been read. It's not all gloomy. The companies are still giving out cash dividends to investors. Well, that's about all we can take on today's edition of Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Channel's news track is at the top of the hour. I'm Estelle Budaga. I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.